in the NFC East and go to the playoffs, even after they got completely run over tonight by the Baltimore Ravens, 34-17. He is Clarence E. Hill Jr. I am Fort Worth Star Telegram sports columnist Mac Engel. Clarence, we've seen this game 1,000 times before, but tonight was especially ugly because it really did look like at some point the Cowboys just laid down. We've seen this team give up disgusting amounts of rushing yardage, well over 300 in the loss to Cleveland earlier this season. But tonight they gave up 294 rushing yards to the Ravens. And at one point, several points, color commentator Troy Aikman seemed to call them out for basically just giving up. Clarence, there's one thing I've learned covering pro sports is you don't question a guy whether or not, you don't question if they've given up or not. Because if you've insinuated that they've given up, that is like the ultimate low and insult. They look like they gave up tonight.
Yeah, talking to Mike McCarthy after the game, he said it's not scheme. We're not talking about scheme. It's not a scheme issue. It was execution issue. And I guess execution can be effort or whatever else, or however you want to call it. He basically said it was on the players tonight, and they didn't get it done. Leighton Vander Esch talked about they didn't play as a team. They didn't play their scheme right. He blamed himself. Clearly Troy Aikman called him out for that first 37-yard touchdown run by Lamar Jackson. It was all over the place, but it's been that way. It's been that way. To say that something's different now, all I know is that the Cowboys are 3-9. You know what that means? Mike McCarthy is officially a loser. His first season as Cowboys coach, they will be losers. There's no way they can get on a run and make this anything other than a losing season. Now, because of the NFC East, everybody's pretty much going to be losers and not win the division. But but on paper, what we already knew is going to happen. The Cowboys would not have a winning record this season, and the truth is, they're going to be closer and have a better shot as a top 5 pick than somehow turning this thing around the last 4 weeks and competing for the division title.
When I listen to that, and I've heard Mike McCarthy talk about execution, we hear that a lot when teams are coming up with excuses to defend their talent. But to me, this continues to reek of a guy who is covering for his boy and Mike Nolan. Look, I am hesitant to any times put it on a coordinator and say, oh, it's all the coordinator's fault. It's a scheme. It's this, that, and the other. Because at the end of it, I agree with Bill Parcells about some things. There's really not that much difference. And if you can play, you can play. And what's become obvious to everybody who's watched this team is most of these defenders just can't play. If that being said, you and I both know changes are going to be made, dramatic ones. I don't care if it's McCarthy's first year. I've asked you this before, and I'll ask you again because now we're early in December. Does he have the guts to fire Mike Nolan, or is that going to be left to Jerry or Stephen Jones?
Yeah, that's the question. All I know is most likely he's not going to fire Mike McCarthy. They do have enough excuses with injuries and the offseason and the COVID-19 that they're not going to fire Mike McCarthy. But this is not what they expected. Jerry Jones said earlier today before the game that, the Giants in Washington have new coaches who implemented new schemes. They're playing good football. The Giants have won 4 straight games. Washington won 3 straight games. They're not playing with the quarterback that they opened the season with. The Giants beat Seattle in Seattle with Colt McCoy as quarterback. Their starter was out. Washington's on their 3rd quarterback. Now, Alex Smith is not just your normal 3rd quarterback, but still they've had things that have happened this season, injuries. If Kyle Allen was still healthy, he'd probably be playing in front of Alex Smith. They had to make adjustments. They have somehow found a way to turn this thing around again with new schemes. The Cowboys cannot continue to blame it on the scheme in Mike McCarthy's first year. Some of this is on him and the coaches, and whether it's the players or how they've been prepared. Those are things that need to be addressed after the season. Will he fire his boy, Mike Nolan? That's the question. I think McCarthy's coming back, but, again, if you fire Mike Nolan, who do you go get? He wasn't known to, have great defense coordinators in Green Bay. I think that was one of the reasons why they ultimately failed with Aaron Rodgers as head coach, because the defense was ultimately bad, especially late in his tenure at Green Bay, and he couldn't get the coordinator right. And he went through a couple of coordinators there. Who does he pick and which scheme is the right scheme? Do you go back to the 4-3? What do you do?
Hang on just a second, because if there's one guy you could get, well, hang on, bear with me. And I wouldn't necessarily be.
You're going to say Wade. You're going to say Wade.
I am going to say Wade Phillips. I don't know if Mike McCarthy's a Wade guy. Wade's been around forever. He's in his 70s. He really wants to work. I am convinced the only reason he's not working is just because teams have decided, well, he's in his 70s. Let's just move on. But he wants to do it. Jerry knows him. Jerry likes him. The only reason Jerry made him his head coach is because he wanted him to be the defensive coordinator. Clarence, is it just too asinine and crazy to think that he would bring him back and force him down?
I think so. I don't think it's, I just don't see them doing it, and I don't see any team doing it. They haven't done it at this point. It'll be interesting to see where they go. But, those are things that among the things that the Cowboys will have to address in the offseason, and really it's time for us to start talking about offseason. I know the Cowboys players talked tonight about we still have a chance and we're going to control our own destiny. And, we just need to try to turn things around. But what gives anybody any hope that the Cowboys are going to finally get it done? The offensive line was not bad tonight. For an offensive line with a lot of backups, they weren't bad tonight. Andy Dalton was awful. Let's just be honest. He does not throw the ball down the field. No. Everything is underneath. He spread the ball around, but there are no big plays in this passing game, and it's all left when Dak Prescott left. He's not pushing the ball down the field, and when he does throw it down the field, it's often off target. That's not what the Cowboys need. They need him to push this is an explosive offense. You have explosive playmakers out there, and they're not getting them the ball down the field for them to make plays.
No, and he doesn't look like he's the same player he was 3 or 4 years ago in Cincinnati when he had one of his better years, and then he hurt his thumb, and he looks like a guy who's over 30 and isn't quite the same player anymore. And even when he was at his high end, we're not talking about a top 5 quarterback. We were talking about a nice NFL quarterback. And I think the hope was that's what the Cowboys thought that they were getting. And instead what they've got is a backup who's playing like an above average backup, not a good backup. Like he's not playing as well as Colt McCoy, right?
No,
he's not. And right now Colt looks to be the class of the backups. And especially with the way he played Sunday in Seattle, like you mentioned. But I look at Andy Dalton, and you're right. Like you and I tweeted back and forth there in the first quarter. I've never seen anything like what Andy did in the first 5 pass attempts. He was like 5 for 5 for 11 yards. Who cares? That's not even a good running game. And so if everything is going to be that short, you're not doing anything. But I agree with you. I thought their line actually was pretty good in the fact you've got nobody starting.
And Zeke ran the ball early. You got that horrible last, goal line scam when when he had first to go to one, he couldn't get in there, but there was no blocking before Andy threw a touchdown pass to Amari Cooper. But Zeke ran well. He had like 50 yards at halftime. He ran well early, but they couldn't get anything consistently going in the passing game to really make it happen. And again, on defense, they kept giving up big plays.
Well, and let's make sure we include somebody in the dunk tank here, and that's the kicker. Now, Greg Zuerlein was awful, and that was Mike McCarthy's boy. He brought him here.
That was Jim Fossil's boy.
Jim Fossil's boy. Pardon me, you're right, Jim Fossil's guy. And he brought him here over Kai Forbath, right? And tonight, he had a 35-yard kick. I don't know what the Cowboys were doing, just screwing around there, and they couldn't get the snap in on time. They've got to move it 5 yards back. He misses. It's not the reason they lost, but it's just one more indictment on this staff and on this team. Like, what are you doing?
Special teams coach Jim Fossil has been we were sold to Billy. He's the best special teams coach in the league. His special teams outside of the watermelon kick and one trick play on the punt return. They've been inconsistent and awful most of the year. They've had penalties. They've had a lot of stuff going on. Yeah, the 35-yard kick because a delay of game became a 40-yard kick. He misses that. Still 40 yards. You should make that. You should make your Greg the leg. Greg then he had missed the 52 and the 53, but those are not too far for him. He's Greg the leg. He's supposed to be Greg the leg.
I'm always a little bit hesitant to kill special teams coaches over a kicker. Kickers are their own guy. But that was his guy, and they brought him here over Kai Forbath, who had been pretty good last year.
And didn't give Kai a chance to compete in training camp. They cut him before training camp. Didn't give him a chance to even compete in training camp.
We talk about offseason because this whole idea that the Cowboys are saying, well, like I heard Zeke tonight say, it's all there in front of us. Who are you insulting? Like, how dumb do you think we are? Like, where is your weed that it's that good that convinces you've got it all in front of you when you have won 3 games? And
Dalton said the same thing. They have to say what they have to say. They can't say the season's over. You expect them to say the season's over? Do you expect anybody to say, well, the season's over? If you thought they changed
the season's over, but at some point you have to have reality. And the reality is this team stinks.
Yeah, but you don't say that about yourselves.
No, I know. I know that. I know you're right. But when we talked about Leighton Vander Esch when he came back from that injury, he was starting to make some plays. And tonight, he called himself out. He got embarrassed on that run by Lamar Jackson. But man, Clarence, the thing to me that I come back, if you're giving up 294 on the ground to a good running attack, but 294 in an NFL game is hard. There's just not that much time.
And one thing McCarthy talked about is that you gave up 294 after a long layoff. You had time to prepare, time to scheme. Unlike the Ravens, who had players who were out, Lamar Jackson didn't get cleared to yesterday. He didn't practice. You know, you had time to prepare, time to scheme, time to get ready for this running game because you know they were going to bludgeon you with the running game, and you still couldn't stop them. That's the problem. It wasn't like this was a short week and you didn't know what was happening. You had time to study. You had time to watch them against Pittsburgh. You had to watch what they do, watch their scheme, get ready for it in practice, and you still didn't get it done.
No, and safety Xavier Woods basically played himself out of the Dallas Cowboys tonight. He was terrible. I know he wasn't probably supposed to be in there, but he was bad. Jalen Smith didn't do anything. None of them did. But Clarence, to me, the big concern, and I know we've talked a lot about Jalen Smith because he got a contract and he's a vocal leader on the team. And Leighton Vander Esch is a former number one. And, you know, certainly his injuries are a big concern. But Clarence, what the hell is going on with that defensive line? I mean, it's one thing to give up a 20 if it's anybody who touches the ball is going for 8-10 yards a pop. This line can't. Everybody's getting to the second level. You and I could get to the second level against this defense. What is going on with that line?
Well, again, you know, you don't have any difference making players, and I've said it from the beginning. You know, outside of DeMarcus Lawrence, there's not a plus player on that defensive line.
Well, hang on, stop real quick. What do you plus players tank? No one would argue with that. What is Randy Gregory?
Randy Gregory's a pass rusher. He's not a good run stopper. He's you know, small, skinny. He's a pass rusher. But you're talking about stopping the run. He and Arthur Smith were awful against the run. They're pass rushers. They're not run stoppers. And you need your wide bodies in the middle, the big boys in the middle of the claw. You look at the great running defense, they're great up the middle. They got guys, big guys that tackle. And the Cowboys, the tackles are just average at best. You know, they don't have any special guys that tackle that can stone, you know, the line of scrimmage and help the linebackers and everybody run to make plays. But there are no special guys. You know, and again, the defensive ends, you know, have had issues setting the edge and people have been killing them on the edge all season. So those are issues. But as far as a plus player, you know, the only plus player is DeMarcus Lawrence. Randy Gregory's a nice pass rusher, but to say he's a top echelon defensive end because he had 2 sacks against in the last game and never had a season more than 6 sacks. Come on, and he's coming off been out a couple of years. You can't expect him to be that type of guy.
No, and it's funny you mentioned Alden Smith, Clarence. If you had not said his name right now, I forgot he even played.
Right.
I mean, he started out so well. He shot out like a cannon, and I wish they had traded him. They could have flipped him, but he's either hurt, they figured him out, or he's exhausted.
Dude, I've been trying to tell people for a long time. Rust is real. You just can't be out of the game for that long and think you can come back and pick it up and you're riding it back again. You may have some of the same skills, pass rush skills, but the total of the season, he is not, especially on the defense line, those are like car wrecks, on every play. And so I'm sure the toll of the season is taking its toll on him because he hasn't experienced this, had to deal with this. It's been a long time since he had to deal with this. So yeah, he had 4 sacks, I think, in his first 3 games, and I think maybe 1 since.
Yeah. That's right. And I there's one of the subjects we want to touch on, and before I let you go, Clarence, a lot of people were looking forward to tonight's game because it was the first chance the Cowboys were going to see Dez Bryant play against them. And something happened tonight that we should have seen coming months ago. Dez Bryant is on the field. Photographers, camera people catch him hugging, high-fiving, shaking hands with Ravens and Cowboys players. He goes in the locker room, has to take a COVID test positive. He's out for the game that he lets the world know via Twitter, but the game goes on. There is no excuse. There's no reason the NFL, the Cowboys, or the Ravens can give us that says that somehow their guys weren't exposed to a guy that was on the field in close contact with them and now all of a sudden they're going to go ahead and play the game, and it's safe and under protocols and procedures. Clarence, that looked like the biggest pile of hypocritical crap that I've seen throughout this whole thing when it comes to getting games in by any league.
No, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. And to me, the Cowboys should be wary. I mean, they had issue when they played the Steelers, and they had a player in the Steelers game who tested positive after the game, played in the game, who tested positive. I think he's the one who came in contact with one of the Cowboys defensive linemen, and he had to go into COVID protocol. But Dez was hugging former teammates and staffers before the game. And the thing about it is he had an inconclusive test that morning, okay, or the day before, whatever it is, and it came back inconclusive. So they tested him again, But if it came back inconclusive, they should have let him know, or they should have tested him before he was able to get out on the field. I don't understand. Absolutely. For him to be able to be out there in pregame warm-ups with an inconclusive test and a pending other test, they dropped the ball, and obviously, talking to McCarthy, he knew about the test, and what they said was, they went through the contract tracing and, a contact tracing, and all the Raven players tested, negative, before the game, but they could test positive tomorrow. That's the problem. And one thing we found out tonight is that you can take a test today or that evening and get a result back. They should be doing that with every player in every game. They should be taking a test before the game and get results back before the game. Well, there should never be a situation where players are playing in the game with positive tests, because you should know that before the game. I don't understand why they don't test the day of the game and get the results the day of the game and take them off the field like they did with Dez Bryant.
What they should be doing is testing and then go into a bubble. Test
right.
If it's on a Saturday, test on Saturday. If everybody's cleared, you go into a little bubble so you can get the game in. Tonight just reaffirmed what everybody had suspected all along, which was, we don't care, get the game in.
Yeah, but they did go into a bubble, because they were going to a bubble the night before the game. The problem with Dez is once he had the inconclusive test, once there was a red flag, he should not have been allowed to be on the field.
And again, that's their mistake. But the fact that they proceeded with the game just makes all of these other intensive protocols and procedures look like a charade and a sham.
Yeah, no doubt. I hope you kicked their butt on it.
I did. Well, it was good talking to you. Cowboys suck. You don't. He's Clarence E. Hill Jr. Look for his fine material in Fort Worth Star Telegram and StarTelegram.com. I'm Mac Engel. See you next week when the Dallas Cowboys pull off a big 3-2 win over the Cincinnati Bengals.
Andy Dalton's homecoming.
Oh, that's big. That's big. Thanks, Clarence.